Hello and welcome to the NBA Outlet presented by OTGBasketball.com. Make sure you follow OTG on Twitter at OTG Basketball. I'm your host, Nick Fay. With me, as always, Kory Waldron. How you doing, Kory?
I'm doing good, Nick. You know, we got a lot of podcasts to record today. Well, only two, but it feels like a nice busy day in the NBA world.
Yes, it is. We got this trade pod to record. We're going to do an injury pod. Actually going to drop episode of Brooklyn Buzz later today as well. So plenty of podcasts on the OTG network. But like you said, the NBA is full of drama. We literally could probably throw in another pod that's all about drama with Steph Curry, Kyrie, and all that. But we're going to focus on trades. This is going to be kind of a continuation of OTG's NBA trade deadline marathon that we're doing on the website. If you didn't know, we're dropping a new ESPN Trade Machine article every day. So it's a verified trade, different one every day, trying to get as many teams in there as possible. What we're going to do today is we're going to look over some of those trades, see which ones we think will work out, what we would change, what we like about them. So starting off, we're going to start with day 2 of the trade deadline marathon. Dennis Dow put together a trade between the Heat and Grizzlies. The Heat send Justice Winslow to the Grizz, and the Grizzlies send back Tyreke Evans. What are your thoughts on this trade?
This was one of the biggest win differentials on the trades made too. In this trade scenario, the Heat would get plus 10 wins, and the Grizzlies would lose 12 wins. For the Grizzlies, you're losing a 1-year player who you're probably going to lose anyways in this offseason. For the Grizzlies, you're going to get a young wing, and not just a young wing, a defensive wing. We know how Memphis loves the defense aspect of things. You know, grit and grind has been their mantra for the last several years, even though, you know, obviously that core is kind of changing as of now. But, you know, with Conley being out, with Conley coming back next year, seeing a Winslow next to him, you know, the defense could be coming back to Memphis if they were to make a trade like this.
Yeah, from the Grizzlies side, there's not much of a risk. You know, you're getting Winslow, 2-year deal, 2 years still left on his deal, still on a good contract. Like you said, we already know about the defensive potential. He's actually shooting 44% from 3 this year. Not a lot of attempts, but that's still promising because shooting's always been an issue for him. The Celtics once offered to trade 4 first-round picks to draft Justice Winslow, so the potential's there. There's always been a lot of hype. Injuries have set him back. So maybe in, you know, Memphis with a good opportunity can really expand. And then the Tyreke Evans part for the Heat. You know, Dennis, you know, the guy who wrote this is really high on the Heat and what they can do. They're 4th in the East right now, only a game behind Cleveland for the 3rd spot. Adding a guy like Tyreke Evans gives you another playmaker, another scorer, just some more punch to that team. And he's an expiring deal, so it doesn't work out. You know, you don't have to keep him. And Evans is shooting great from three-point line this season, 38%.
Yeah, Tyreke Evans, I think, well, I mean, I know I'm going to mention him later. For sure, but he's been one of the best deals. First off, coming into this season at only $3 million a year for 1 year. He's been injured throughout his career, and by far this year, we can both agree between rebounding, scoring, shooting, passing. This is the Tyreke Evans we all thought we were going to see the Kings, but he never really took those steps, and we're finally seeing what Tyreke Evans could have been now. And I mean, going to free agency next year, Tyreke Evans may be one of the most sought-out free agent guys out there.
Yeah, especially if he can finish this season strong. Like you said, I think he won Rookie of the Year in Sacramento. It looked like he was going to be one of these players that impact the game on so many levels. Injuries and just, you know, different fits didn't really work out for him. So this is a good opportunity. And it's a good opportunity for the Heat to kind of take a bigger risk on this season and go all in. And then also, they don't have to worry about Winslow. You know, in 2 years, they'd have to worry about if they're going to give him all that money and keep him around. Now they don't have that decision on their hands. So I think this is actually a trade that kind of benefits both sides.
I agree, Nick. This would be Dennis came up with a good one here.
Yeah, I think this trade, I mean, I don't know if it's going to happen, but I would say it's a really definitely possible scenario. Moving on to another trade, day 4. Jacob Hershon. This is more of a fun trade, and I love Vince Carter. So Golden State will send Nick Young and Damian Jones to Sacramento, and Sacramento will send Vince Carter to Golden State. Obviously, in terms of basketball talent, it's not a huge upgrade for Golden State. But for Sacramento's side, they're getting more minutes because they'd likely cut Nick Young. They're getting Jones, a guy who maybe they could fit into their future. And then Vince Carter with Golden State just gives them a reliable veteran. We all would love to see Vince win a championship.
Yeah, same thing. I don't really have much else to say besides it'd be very nice to see Vince Carter win a ring. And, you know, the Kings would get Nick Young. And it'd be kind of fun to see Nick Young get more minutes and be able to be more of a vocal point in offense because we don't know what the Kings are doing. I kind of think they're going to move some of those veterans on their roster like George Hill and maybe even Zach Randolph. But Vince Carter deserved another shot to win. I still don't understand why some of these guys went to Sacramento in the first place. So I would love to see a couple of these guys get off this roster, Vince Carter being one of them.
Yeah, one less big paycheck does not hurt at all. And I think Nick Young, if he went to Sacramento, would probably get bought out because they want to open up minutes for De'Aaron Fox, Buddy Hield. So Nick Young could probably hop onto another contender and maybe add some shooting over there. Then Golden State doesn't really have to worry about him making any mistakes for them. But he has been shooting well, so who knows about this trade. Like I said, it's more of a fun trade for Vince getting his championship opportunity. But moving on to day 5, Kory wrote this trade up himself between the Blazers and Magic. The Blazers will send Mo Harkless, Noah Vonleh, and a 2019 first-round pick to the Magic for Evan Fournier. What were your thoughts when you wrote this one up?
Yeah, so obviously Portland is one of those teams. They're one of those teams that's very gritty. They're very tough to play against. We know they actually have one of the best defenses in this league. I don't know if it's still top 3, but it was top 3 when I wrote this piece. And they just need more offense. Obviously this team is really driven by Lillard and McCollum. And then outside of that, you don't really know who's going to step up and give you any support. Evan Turner gets paid decent money, but he's not you more than 10 points, rarely ever. Mo Harkless, I know last year he shot like 39% from 3, and then he didn't take another 3 for like the last 7 games, so he would get a bonus check. He wanted to keep his percentage up, so it was like an incentive deal. So like if it was like under 39%, he wouldn't get like $500,000. If it was over, he would. So he didn't take a single 3 like for like the last like 12 or 9 games. And I just think Orlando, we know, wants to blow it up. They just can't seem to win. Last night they were up by 21 against the Pacers, choked, and they fell apart and ended up blowing the game. The Pacers came back to win. The Magic just after that really hot start, they really cooled off. Evan Fournier, he's got a 4-year deal, $17 million. Orlando just wants to reboot it, and money-wise, this works out. They get a young guy in Harkless. Noah Vonleh's on a 1-year deal. You can maybe resign if you choose. But the Portland Trailblazers could really use a 3-point shooter next to Lillard and McCollum, and Fournier could just become a spot-up shooter.
Yeah, for the Magic side, getting that draft pick and then taking a flyer on Noah Vonleh, I don't know if they'd want Mo Harkless. If you didn't know, Harkless actually was drafted by the Magic and they traded him, but you could easily swap Myers Leonard in for the trade, I believe, because their contracts are only about $1 million difference. And Evan Fournier with the Blazers, like you said, gives them some offensive pop, some 3-point shooting, because I believe they're 23rd in 3-point attempts per game, which obviously we know 3 points are so important in the NBA. Fournier shooting 38% from 3. I think that has an impact. The only question for the Blazers would be, do we want to lock up this money? I think they have a big decision coming anyways with Nurkic this summer. Are we going to go all in and lock up our cap books with Dame, CJ, possibly Fournier and Nurkic, or do we want to try going another avenue? I think the Blazers are in a weird spot, though. We've mentioned on another pod, too, is stuck into that money thing. So Fournier might be a guy they can get right now, gives them some offensive pop. The only question I say is, how much better do we think the Blazers would be after this trade?
I mean, yeah, that's a great point, Nick. Because even that's the sad thing, but that's kind of an issue with any of these teams for the most part, unless you're like the Warriors, Cavs.
Exactly.
You're going to make a team just to become maybe a 5 seed at best in the West. The needle can only be moved so much because unless you're making a blockbuster trade, none of these trades are going to make you contenders. It's just how it is right now in the NBA because we know how great the Warriors are, and we know how the Rockets have been. The Cavs are still obviously favorites in the East. The Celtics are tough. The Raptors have been extremely well played so far. Do you want to win a couple more games?
You mentioned blockbuster. What this could do, this is just thinking big, fantasy picture right here. They pick up Evan Fournier. You're more capable of moving CJ McCollum right now. And CJ McCollum is going to be able to necessarily bring a big name in. So maybe this is a part of a bigger trade that they make and they try to open up some different avenues, or who knows what they're trying to do, but they probably want to do something because right now where they're at, they're probably not going to win a playoff series. They're going to squeak into the playoffs, get knocked out in the first round. Fournier gives them some offensive pop and opens up maybe some flexibility because they could move him in the future too. So I think I think a lot of people think about, when they look at a trade, they're like, good player for good player, but this could open up different avenues for the Blazers as well. And on the Magic side, like we said, draft picks are what they're looking for right now. They're not very good. They didn't do a good job keeping their young talent. They need to get some more young talent and try to keep it this time. But moving on to day 7, Jacob's back up in here for a Pelicans and Hawks trade. The Pels are going to send Alexis Ajinka and Cheick Diallo for Dwayne Dedmon.
All right. So obviously, I don't know if Jacob knew something we didn't know.
Yeah, this was before the Cousins trade happened. The Cousins injury happened.
Right. Yeah. With the Cousins injury happening, this trade to me made a whole lot more sense for the Pelicans. They're gonna really miss DeMarcus Cousins, as we know, who's having a career year. We'll talk about that in the next podcast, how sad all that is. But Dwayne Dedmon is a typical center for the most part. He plays both sides. He plays defense. He can catch oops. He can rebound decently. And we know how Rondo can be with, centers like that. So Rondo and Dedmon, I see being a very good combination if it was to happen. Drew Holiday obviously shouldn't have much problems. Like Dwayne Dedmon is one of those centers where you can pretty much plug into almost any system and you're going to get some kind of positive contribution. And then, of course, being out and Chuck Diallo, who hasn't really shown much, and then Ajenko, so long, good riddance. None of these guys the Pelicans really miss, and Dedmon could definitely make an immediate impact.
Yeah, and I also forgot to mention the Hawks would receive a second-round pick from the Pelicans. But like you said, Dedmon's a really good fit. And even if he wrote this before Cousins got hurt because one of the issues for the Pelicans has been front court depth, and they were playing Cousins and Davis way too much. Obviously, some of that could be correlated to the injury. We'll get into that later, like you said. But Dedmon's just a guy. He can add to their defense. Cousins is having an amazing season offensively, just all over the place, and having a lot of impact on the game. But Dedmon will give him something defensively. Him and Anthony Davis, will definitely do a great job protecting the rim. And he's added a three-point shot to his game. So Dedmon's a solid guy. Nice contract, not really much to worry about. You get rid of the Jenka contract. That's pretty much a salary dump. Chuck Diallo has shown some decent things in Summer League, but he's never really going to get the right opportunity in New Orleans. So the Hawks, maybe, things work out with him. He could be a backup or a starter, who knows? And they pick up another second-round pick. Another trade I like for both teams.
Yeah, the draft pick would be the biggest thing for the Hawks because we know they're, I think they're still the worst team currently in the NBA. And right now you're looking for the future, trying to get guys to fit around Dennis Schroeder. And a draft pick just gives you another pick to get another young asset.
Yeah, and who knows? Diallo, it's a flyer. When you're at this point, like the Nets are, the Hawks are, some of these bad teams, you're going to take flyers on young guys that maybe haven't worked out, and next thing you know, they could, reestablish their career. Moving on to day 9.5, some days we drop more than one trade. Matt Shear, he has a trade between the Utah Jazz and the Chicago Bulls. The Jazz will be sending Derek Favors to the Bulls, and the Bulls will send back Nikola Mirotic. Thoughts on this one?
This trade to me was funny because they're both -4 wins on the ESPN trade machine. So neither one actually helps according to ESPN trade machine. For the Jazz, it gives them another stretch four, or it gives them a stretch four alongside Trey Lyles, so they can kind of get more. Wait, is Trey Lyles even on the Jazz now?
No, he's on him for Donovan Mitchell.
Yeah, he's on the Nuggets. Yeah, he's on the Nuggets. Yeah, my fault. He's obviously a stretch four. Derek Favors is going to be a free agent anyways. You'll get Mirotic for one more year after this for the Jazz. The Jazz could always use a little bit more offense. We know their defense is top-notch. With Rudy Gobert back, and hopefully he stays healthy, Derek Favors anyways is probably going to lose some minutes because him and Gobert on the floor at the same time just doesn't really work in the new age of basketball because neither guys, they're constantly guys who's scrapping for rebounds, scrapping down low. And then for the Bulls, Derek Favors is a small ball 5 instead of Robin Lopez. It's not the worst thing. It could open up things for Chicago to trade a guy like Robin Lopez if you get a Derek Favors. I actually think this trade would be a lot better for the Bulls. I don't know if it's really -4 for the Bulls. I actually think Favors would actually make them a little bit better, especially with Chris Dunn when he comes back healthy. Because Mirotic, as we said this on previous pods too, Nick, he's shooting lights out. And we know Mirotic is not a lights out shooter. At some point, his hot streak has to start, coming back down to earth. And you want to get rid of him before that happens.
Yeah, get some good value for him. And for the Bulls, they pick up Favors. They like him. It works out well. He's a free agent. You keep him. You have a big moving forward for the future. On the Jazz side, Mirotic, I think he's a pretty good fit for what they need offensively. They need more three-point shooting. He gives them some offensive pop. They're currently bottom 10 in offense. Like you said, he's shooting a high number right now, 42% from three, 17 points in 24 minutes. He'll probably definitely cool down, but if he can even maintain some of this level, the Jazz could definitely use that offensive firepower. And like you said, Gobert and Favors in the new NBA just aren't a good front court combo.
Yeah, there's certain guys. It's just there's got to be a move made, and I think Mirotic is one of those guys who I think will be traded before this deadline. Like there's like certain guys you just know will be traded, and both these guys I think will be moved. And hey, probably will be moved for each other. It's possible.
Yeah, and Mirotic I think is like a guy that we'll talk about guys that are locked to be moved. But when he wants to be moved and the Bulls also want to move him, it just makes it so much more likely. And then this is a scenario where Quinn Snyder, coach of the Jazz, has done a great job unlocking players. So maybe you could even get more out of him as well. But moving on to our next trade, day 10.5, another Jazz trade, Jazz and Sixers. The Jazz would be sending Joe Johnson and Rodney Hood to the Sixers for Dario Saric and Jared Bayless.
I hate this trade. I'm sorry, Matt Peoples. I do not like this trade. And this is why. Dario Saric at $2 million right now. He is arguably, I know he plays some starting minutes, but he's almost like a sixth man of the year candidate to a degree. He's been fantastic for Philly. He rebounds, he passes the ball well, he scores well. I absolutely love him. I get Jared Bayless. He is dreadful. Your fans want him gone because he's just not very good, and they wonder why he gets minutes. So obviously, this is kind of a trade just to get Rodney Hood. But at the same time, both guys you're trading for, if you're the Sixers, in Hood and Johnson, they're one-year deals. So you really lose both of them. You're not going to re-sign Joe Johnson. He's just older now. He hasn't looked that good this year. Rodney Hood, when he is healthy and on the floor, is pretty dynamic. He plays a lot of good defense. I just don't see why Philly would trade, Sargic for two guys who could possibly walk at the end of the year.
Well, I think one reason that they're looking at it too is they want to really dump that Jared Bayless contract. If they dump Jared Bayless's contract, they have the potential to offer a player a max contract this summer. So they're really in the race for LeBron or a Paul George, like Matt mentioned in his piece. So I think Bayless is a real reason they want to get rid of this contract. And Saric, he is a talented guy, but he's probably never going to hit the potential in Philly with the other guys in front of him, like Ben Simmons, Joel Embiid. And I think they're thinking, you know what? If we pick up Rodney Hood and Joe Johnson, we could play a little bit smaller sometimes. Also, we have Trevor Booker. So I don't know. That might be an idea in their head. And I think the fact that their wings have been so bad for Philly, other than J.J. Redick, and they're just guard play in general, they could use somebody like a Rodney Hood, especially a Rodney Hood that's going to be, a third or fourth option on the offense. He's not going to be a guy that you need to create for himself or anything. He's going to be playing off a guy like Ben Simmons. Joe Johnson, what he brings is, like you said, not much more after this year, but he will give you a nice veteran presence in the playoffs, something that the Sixers will need, obviously, for the first playoff series. He was great for Utah last year. Obviously, I wouldn't expect the same things with Philly, but it'd be a good presence to have with that team. But Saric is a young piece, and, it's always risky when you trade a guy like Saric who hasn't hit his potential yet because he's shown a lot with his game so far.
Yeah, I guess and like Matt said, actually, in the end of his piece, it would be hard to see Sargent go. And that's for me. I guess I'm just I have no stake in the Sixers, but I'm too attached to the fact that, this is already what he's producing now. And like you said, this is not what he could become. And even after these 3 years are up, he'll be restricted to free agent, I believe.
Yeah. So then
he's on a restricted, right.
So then you get to keep him.
I don't know. It'd be tough for me.
And the Jazz, I think, would do wonders with Saric. I think he might be a wonderful fit next to Gobert with his versatile skill set and able to throw oops to him over the place. From the Jazz side, I actually think I might like this more, especially with the fact they're trying to move Rodney Hood. So that'd be a trade I'll keep an eye on. I think it also is a lot in the Sixers. Do they want that veteran presence for the playoffs, and how much do they want to make a move in free agency? Do they really believe that they have an opportunity to get LeBron James? The way things are going in Cleveland and, the opportunities out there, Philly really could be a possible candidate for him in the summer.
You're right, and I want to say one more thing. You're right. For the Jazz perspective, this is a good trade because then you also have Donovan Mitchell, Sargic, and Gobert for the future. Does it become a big three or whatever that case may be? Possibly. Joe Ingles is still there. That'd be a very nice squad going forward. But like you said, for the Sixers, I just don't see it. And the LeBron thing, I don't know why people want LeBron in Philly so bad. I think if you get LeBron, it's the growth of Ben Simmons because they're to a degree the same player, and Ben Simmons can't shoot, and LeBron needs shooters around him. I know there would be some positives to LeBron being there, but I just don't think it's a realistic place for LeBron to land.
Yeah, I think it would be at best case, a dark horse scenario. If they were able to land, if they had LeBron, Ben Simmons, and Joel Embiid, They would honestly probably be better off starting 2 shooting guards instead of a point guard. At that point, somebody who was just a lockdown 3-point shooter. So, but that's for a whole nother podcast. Moving on to today's trade, day 11. This is a pretty good trade. I personally like it. It's done by Evan Dial. Cleveland Cavaliers and Atlanta Hawks. The Cavs send Cedi Osman, Tristan Thompson, their first-round pick of 2018 for Kent Bazemore and Dwayne Dedmon.
Kent Bazemore, as much crap I've given the $16 million a year contract for Kent Bazemore, when you actually watch the Hawks play, he actually plays with a lot of good energy.
He plays hard.
He's constantly, he goes for loose balls. He plays really aggressive. And he actually, to a degree, fills up a stat sheet. He rebounds decently. He passes the ball decently well. He gets a couple steals a game. And offensively is the issue. He's kind of hit or miss. I've seen him miss a couple layups this year. Very to a degree. Dedmon's a little bit cheaper than obviously Thompson. He's a solid center, maybe a little bit better than Tristan Thompson, who's been up and down currently. And then Bazemore is a more ready now producer than Cedi. This is, again, the Cavs need to make a move, and this would be a trade that I wouldn't necessarily hate to see happen, just because there needs to be some kind of change in Cleveland.
And it's not a huge risk. It's not like they're locking up big time money. Bazemore's contract's pretty big, but at least he's a young, decent player. He's definitely overpaid, but it's not that bad. Dwayne Dedmon's probably a little underpaid, so it kind of balances out a bit. And I think what it does is it adds a lot of defense and it adds some athleticism. I think Ken Bazemore's kind of a guy that they need, maybe not necessarily him, but they need that athletic pop. They need some speed. They need some verticality. They need somebody who can get up and down the floor. Like you said, he's always playing with energy. This definitely brings some defense to the Cavs. And then Evan mentioned in his piece that if they could do this in the George Hill trade, they could really change the defensive makeup of this team. They'd be able to probably start a lineup with George Hill, whoever you want to put it, Kent Bazemore, LeBron James, Kevin Love, and Dwayne Dedmon. Defensively, that's a lot better than what they're throwing out there right now.
Yeah, and also, as you alluded to, the Cavs have an issue of playing hard. We've seen the Hawks, for as bad as they are, they play very hard.
You give them a lot of props.
Ken Bazemore's a guy who plays hard. Dedmon plays hard. The Cavs have an issue of not playing hard. We've seen the team ease and everything else. These guys could be guys who maybe help change that culture. And we know George Hill obviously would like to be in a winning culture again, being with the Kings currently and not winning and not getting the minutes he wants to get. I think you made a great point. This could definitely be like a two-part trade that really changes the defensive culture, at least for this season for Cleveland.
And then hypothetically, LeBron leaves. I'm not saying this would be a great team, but if you're throwing out George Hill, Kent Bazemore, someone mystery at small forward, Kevin Love, and Dwayne Dedmon, you're at least a mediocre team.
Possibly re-sign Isaiah.
Yeah, or go out and get a good small forward, somebody else out there that's can score some buckets for you or something, or make another move, or you're gonna have that probably a top 10 pick, top 12 pick with the Nets pick. Maybe that's your pick right there at small forward. Who knows? So I think that would work out in the Hawks' perspective. Cedi Osman seems like a guy that could have some potential in the NBA as a role player. They take a flyer on him. They sit on Tristan Thompson's contract. Obviously, he's overpaid. He's not living up to that. And then they get the Cavs first-round pick, another young asset for them. And when you're in this stage, you just want to have first-round picks on your squad.
We like first-round picks.
Exactly, especially when you're what the Hawks have, and it's not any shade at them because I'm a Nets fan. They just don't have a ton of offensive talent right now. So any type of young asset that they're getting is going to help them move forward for the future.
Yeah, and Cedi has looked, to the minutes he finally, whenever he gets on the court, that is, he's played pretty well from when I've seen him on the floor. And I would be okay with taking a risk on a young guy like Cedi and then getting Cleveland's first-round draft pick, which isn't going to be great. But those two, to me, that's a pretty good swap.
Yeah, and then you have Tristan Thompson, who, he's not great, but he'll play hard, and you'll be able to play him more minutes, grab you a ton of rebounds. Him and John Collins will be pulling down like 12 boards a game.
And Schroeder's a very good pick-and-roll point guard, and I think he could probably get a little bit more out of Tristan Thompson, probably, because Tristan Thompson obviously would have to become more of a vocal point of that team because Dedmon's, pretty crucial to them.
Yeah.
So it could work out.
And anyways, it's, they're taking him as a salary dump. So if they get anything extra out of it, that's great. If it doesn't work out. It's whatever. You just sit on the contract until you're good again. But moving on from the trade day scenarios, like I said, OTG is going to be doing that NBA trade deadline. for up to the trade deadline day. So there'll be, some days we drop 1 trade, some days we drop 2 trades. Maybe when it gets close, we'll start dropping 3. We're going to talk about it on the next podcast as well. Definitely all about the trades at OTG. And just a quick reminder, you can always listen to the NBA Outlet on iTunes, Blog Talk Radio, and OTGBasketball.com. But we still got a little bit more to talk about. Kory, what stars are most likely to be moved? This isn't like guys that are locked to be moved, but what stars do you think are most likely to be moved over the next, few weeks?
My only question is, what are we defining as a star?
I would say somebody who's made an all-star game or has been considered an all-star snub or all-star consideration. That's what I would, say is a star.
Okay. So for me, there's a few guys I'm looking at. I think Marc Gasol is on the move. I think DeAndre Jordan is on the move. I believe Lou Williams could be on the move. And I'm starting to believe that Isaiah Thomas may be on the move. I don't know how the ownership and front office feels about the recent things going on in the locker room. There was another soundbite the other day that came out with Isaiah Thomas talking to a media member who said that there's members in the locker room who don't like your shot selection, and Isaiah Thomas kind of bit back. There's a lot of drama right now in Cleveland, and I'm starting to think that maybe you trade Isaiah Thomas just because you don't want the noise. It's getting a little bit serious in Cleveland. I think somebody's got to go. And I'm not so certain that Isaiah Thomas survives in Cleveland this full year.
Honestly, it would maybe make sense. Obviously, the fit's not working out. The Cavs already having defensive flaws, and then putting a player like that really hurts. And like you said, the attitude, I've seen the clips that you mentioned, and it just seems like there's just some tension there. Isaiah Thomas just seems like he doesn't seem happy. He doesn't trust his teammates in the sense that people are talking smack about him in the organization. So, and it could be him, it could be other guys. We don't really know what's going on in that locker room. Kevin Love, on the other hand, wouldn't be another guy I wouldn't be surprised if the Cavs trade. Maybe the Cavs go and they make some crazy blockbuster where they include Isaiah, Kevin Love, and, the Brooklyn pick and their own first-round pick, and they try to add some major star talent to this team. Who knows? But definitely wouldn't be surprised if the Cavs make a big-time move. But for me, Kemba Walker, I think that that Jordan interview was kind of just almost like fake in a sense that they were still saying that they would trade Kemba and they wanted a ton of talent back. They're never going to get that type of talent. So what they did is I think just try to push up the value of Kemba. So I think he could be another guy that's on the move, especially with the Hornets. They're probably not going to make the playoffs. What are you going to do? You need to get some of these bad contracts. Like you said, Marc Gasol, I think he's a lock now. We're going to talk about in another pod we dropped today, the injury pod. And Conley being down, there's really not much point to keep Gasol, especially at his age. There's no scenario where the Grizzlies are going to get enough talent to compete by the time Gasol is still there and still playing well. So why not take advantage of his value right now? There's no point in keeping him on that roster.
I agree. I got into a conversation with someone on Twitter yesterday when I said that I think Gasol and Evans are gone now. And he was like, keep Gasol. Why would you trade a core piece? Gasol's not young.
He's 30 plus.
Right. I think he's 31 or 32. Him being a core piece is no longer there. He's on the back 9 of his career. And at a guy his size who's never been very quick of foot anyways, going to be a point in time where he's going to become very hard to play, I believe. And he may even have to take a backseat as like a 6-man role. We saw Al Jefferson, not that Al Jefferson and Marc Gasol are anywhere near the talent, like the same talent level, because Gasol is way, head and shoulders better than Al Jefferson. But big guys like that, once your quickness goes, you can't really stay on the floor for 30-plus minutes. Obviously, Gasol passes and rebounds, a little bit of everything, which gives him a little bit more value. But, I would sell high now. Why try and wait to see what Conley will be next year after a surgery, who's already had a couple major injuries? And then you have to see if Gasol can still produce at an older level. You don't know if you even have Tyreke Evans next year. The Grizzlies could be worse next year than they are this year if you kept Gasol and Conley.
Exactly. So I agree with you on that one. I think you just you move him. You don't know where he's going to go after this in terms of his career. Maybe it is just a ploy by the front office convincing us that they're really not going to trade him. But in theory, they're just going to wait until this last week before the deadline and just move him. Because they already knew. They probably already had to know that Conley could possibly have season-ending surgery before they announced it. It was obviously something they thought about over the last few weeks. So I wouldn't be surprised if Gasol's move and this was all type of a ploy. DeAndre Jordan, like you mentioned. DeAndre, just I haven't watched a ton of Clipper ball, but he doesn't seem as much involved emotionally into the team as some of the other guys. So I think that he could be on the move. Obviously, the rumor came out that he wanted to be traded to Houston. That's not going to happen. Cleveland seems like a possible scenario. We've seen some scenarios with the Bucks as well. I wouldn't be surprised to see DeAndre move. Lou's a little bit harder to move. I think because of his hype, I think the Clippers want to keep him and they want to keep that excitement with the team. So I think a DeAndre is more likely to be moved than Lou.
I agree that and also there's no like you're not losing anything by keeping Lou Williams, right?
Yeah.
You got a 1-year deal. My only thought is if you don't want to pay Lou Williams big money, which he arguably could get this offseason, that's why you trade him.
Yeah.
If you're the Clippers, if you don't want to give Lou Williams a big contract, don't hold on to him this year. I mean, unless it's all about making money. If you want to sell tickets the rest of this year and move DeAndre, I mean, yeah, Blake Griffin and Lou Williams, they're going to sell tickets still.
Yeah. I think they want to keep Lou.
But
I think they do want to keep Lou. I mean, obviously, we'll see in the offseason. Steve Ballmer has been wanting to make the team competitive and keep the good players, obviously, going in on the offseason. Is there any what do you think about like the possibility of Anthony Davis or Damian Lillard being moved? Is there any possibility in that or no?
Lillard, no. I thought so when that first the team meeting comes out, or not team meeting, he met with the owner. And whenever that happens, obviously us as, fans and guys who cover the NBA, we think, oh, that's generally not a good sign. But complained about the snub thing, he got into the All-Star game, good for him. I don't think he's leaving. I think it was more so just a star being frustrated with the team's direction and wanting to make sure that he's not wasting his time. I think he's going to stay in Portland probably for the rest of his career, honestly. And who was the other name?
Anthony Davis.
Yeah, no.
Before we go on Anthony Davis, though, do you think it's more likely C.J. McCollum could be moved this year, or either guy's moved at all?
I think C.J. McCollum is more likely, although I don't believe either guy's moved. I don't think they'd break up a duo unless, Lillard would have to give him the okay, honestly. I don't think you move McCollum unless Lillard is okay with you moving McCollum, because I'm pretty sure they have a great relationship. Those guys have been together for a while now. I just don't see you breaking up a duo unless, the star of your franchise and your centerpiece is okay with it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Dame probably has a say in that. I think they move CJ if there's some type of deal where they're bringing in some other type of star talent. There's a couple scenarios where it would make sense, but I don't know if the other team would do it. Who would be your locks? Like, these wouldn't be guys. They could be stars, but what players or teams do you think are locks to make trades or be traded this year?
So my lock players, because I wrote this down. Courtney Lee, I think that's an interesting guy from the Knicks. The Knicks are in a weird place. I know they're kind of competing for a playoff spot. There's a lot of teams who could use Courtney Lee. Even the Thunder now with Robertson going down. Courtney Lee would be interesting there. T.J. Warren from the Suns. He's played some good minutes down there next to Devin Booker. He's on a 4-year, $50 million deal. That's not too bad. It's pretty friendly for a guy who's still averaging, I think, like 17 or 18 points per game. In the trade marathon days, I think Rodney Hood could be moved. And then, of course, these two studs from the Lakers, Julius Randle, Jordan Clarkson. We've heard them in a ton of rumors throughout this entire season. It seems like every week it's talked about that one of those guys, if not both, will be moved. And the Lakers seem to want to free up that cap space. So I think if you're going to trade them, obviously we got 11 days left or whatever. It's the time.
Yeah. The Lakers team, they're just a weird situation. They're trying to go – what they do at the deadline will decide if they're going all in this offseason or they're going to try to retain the young guys. That'll be a deciding factor. But I agree. I think they're going for that all-in thing. And if they don't trade Clarkson, I think they're at least moving Randall and trying to get value before the offseason because he's been solid. He could be a guy that could help another team. Tyreke Evans, who we mentioned before, I think he's a lock too, especially on that expiring deal. The Grizzlies aren't going to want to re-up him. George Hill, I think that situation's going to get toxic if they don't trade him and you want to open up the minutes anyways for your young guys. Nikola Mirotic, like we mentioned on the trade day. When both parties want to trade a guy, I think it's more likely to happen. Greg Monroe, I don't know if he'll necessarily be traded, but I think he's cut, at least at some point. He's no longer on the Suns by the end of the season. And then Robin Lopez would be another guy I might consider. I think he could give the team nice value. Nerlens Noel, obviously he's not staying in Dallas. They want to get at least a second-round pick for him, I would assume, at this point. So that'd be some other teams, some players. what teams do you think are locked to make a trade? Like, it doesn't have to be a trade for getting better players or worse, but what team do you think we'll see make a trade 100% before the deadline?
All right, so two teams to me stick out. The Wizards, first off. I think the Wizards, they're in a place where you sent me a funny video the other night about a guy ranting about Gortat only getting one rebound. They have their own issues. They have a lot of money locked up. I don't know what moves they could make. We've seen them make a move almost at every deadline last year or the year before. They keep trying to add talent for like a quick playoff run. It worked out. That's a team, personally, that I think Lou Williams would be a great fit on, just to get some kind of offensive punch off the bench. And I think the Thunder weren't going to buy, but now they kind of have to buy. We know how good they were with Roberson. And then Roberson obviously now being out, you got to make some kind of move. The bench unit is stagnant. I would like to see them make a move. I think the Cavs have to make a trade without question. There's just no way you can go any farther into this season with this current roster. And then my own fan interest, I guess. But I think the Pacers are going to buy somebody. I think, especially after winning last night, they have a few issues. 3-point shooting mark. I wouldn't be surprised if they tried to trade, maybe even their draft pick or TJ Leaf and maybe Bogdanovich. I have a trade article I'm going to be posting either later today or tomorrow for OTG that too. But I think they're going to try and add a 3-point shooter to try and better this roster.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised with the Pacers because they've already kind of surprised and maybe they want to add some more to that. I like all the teams you chose. Other teams I'd probably throw in there would be the Hornets. I think you can't go into the offseason being this mediocre, and you're going to have a lot easier time dropping contracts right now. And then the Hawks. I think the Hawks have a few guys, like we mentioned, Dedmon, Ersan Ilyasova, Marco Bellinelli. It just makes sense to move those guys. I wouldn't be surprised if my Nets are in there. There always seems pretty busy. Damari Carroll, Joe Harris seem like hot names on the deadline. But question about the Pacers. Someone wrote a trade article, and they included Miles Turner. Do you think the Pacers would ever consider trading Miles Turner at this point and for more young pieces, or no?
Okay. So this is the real issue here. This is becoming a more talked about thing, at least in Pacerland, because of how good Sabonis has been. There's going to be a point in time within the next 2 years where you're going to either have to choose between Sabonis and Miles Turner. You have to arguably offer them both the max if they continue to play at how they play. And the issue is now who you go with. Sabonis has been fantastic. For a 21-year-old, he's fantastic in the pick and roll. He has a very high basketball IQ. Must get it from his father or something. I don't know. It's like his father was an NBA great or something. So he's been really good. And then for Miles Turner, Larry Bird bought in on him. He says he could be the greatest Pacer of all time. He shows glimpses that he could be something very special. But, there are times where he's just not that good. He doesn't rebound very well at times. He's pretty much a block or bust at times defensively. He's a very good 3-point shooter, but interior, like in the paint wise, he doesn't have a lot of post moves yet. I think if they were to make a move, Miles Turner, right now, I think would be the odd man out between him and Sabonis, and that's just because Turner's missed some time due to injuries, and Sabonis has so far this season 51 games.
Yeah, and Sabonis is just super tough and like super strong. I don't know. He just he seems like an intimidating guy. It's like they're almost opposites because Turner doesn't really want to bang bodies, where Sabonis is trying to bang you 3 times before he scores in the post. So I think it's interesting, and it's crazy to think about. Like you said, Larry Bird was so high on him, where Miles Turner was at his rookie year and where he's at right now. He's really struggling. I think yesterday he had some real foul trouble. What do you think I'm curious, just for my own interest now, what do you think the Pacers would be looking to get from Miles Turner if they did move him at this point?
Well, it depends on the direction of the team, right? So, for example, and this is just me throwing this out because we mentioned CJ McCollum a ton. I could see a deal where you send CJ McCollum for Miles Turner and TJ Leaf or something like that. Either a mid-level, almost borderline all-star who's not, who's 26 or whatever, still entering his prime, or it's got to be another young draft pick. But really get value from Miles Turner because Miles Turner has shown enough. We've seen the flashy throw down, tomahawk dunks. We've seen the ferociousness in that. We've seen huge monster blocks on LeBron James last year. We've seen him shoot better at three-pointer this year than he has in his career so far. You can definitely get a mid-level, almost all-star to a really good draft pick for Miles Turner, I think.
Yeah, I would definitely be that'd be a guy that I'd be intrigued by because I still think there's a lot of potential to get. It almost is harder for him now because I feel like the Pacers are ahead of schedule, so there's more pressure on him to be good. Where if the Pacers were a little bit, worse, where we thought they'd actually be at, it might be a little bit easier for him to kind of get out his full potential. But now that the Pacers are kind of, a step ahead of schedule and they're starting to compete and they're probably going to make the playoffs, he hasn't been able to kind of unlock himself because it's been more pressure situations instead of carefree.
Yeah, and this is another big issue. Not a big issue, but you've seen when Victor Oladipo went down, the Pacers really struggled. And then Miles Turner went down, and they really didn't skip a beat. And that's not saying he's not an important part of the team, but it kind of shows you your impact when your team doesn't really miss a beat without you compared to losing a guy like Victor Oladipo.
100% agree, and I think that's something. Obviously, it's not always necessarily the players. It could just be the depth of the team, but it's something to always keep an eye on. Last segment of the trade day, buy or sell. So I'm going to give you a team, and you're going to tell me if they're buying or selling. These are all teams that are kind of on the cusp. So we'll start with the Detroit Pistons, buying or selling.
Oh man, see, this is a tough one. All right, so I think they're going to buy, and that's only because I think they're just one or two pieces away. Andre Drummond has been very good. Tobias Harris has been very good. But then besides that, they're kind of questionable. Avery Bradley has not been what they expected. Reggie Jackson obviously is out with an injury, or I'm not sure if he's back. He might be back now.
No, I think he's still out.
He's still out, right? With an ankle injury.
Yeah, and it's just an ongoing thing with him. It's not an ankle, it's tendonitis. So he's a guy that they look to count on, and he's no longer a guy they can count on.
Right. So I think they buy, and I'm not even and even though they're buying, it doesn't mean that Avery Bradley isn't a part of them buying. Because I think Avery Bradley could be moved for a piece that kind of betters them. Ish Smith, for them, luckily, has been very good at the point guard position. But again, they're just missing something. They're missing that offensive punch. They're a very good defensive unit, but they're just missing some more offense.
Yeah, I think they're probably buying just because Van Gundy is the coach and the president. So anytime that situation happens, it's just more likely you're in win now mode. And they want to make the playoffs because if they don't make the playoffs, I think going in the offseason, they have to consider blowing it up because it's not like they have a ton of young talent. So they've been a team. Jack came up with a trade. Jack Manuel, if you don't know, he does the Brooklyn Buzz with myself, JBT Pod. He came up with a trade with the Nets and Pistons where they add Damari Carroll, Joe Harris. They give up Stanley Johnson or Luke Kennard. I think there could be a situation. And Avery Bradley, like you said, could be moved. And I think it would almost be to match salaries because the way Bradley's played this season has not been good or what they expected or what we expect around the whole NBA. It's kind of crazy. I think it says a lot about Brad Stevens, not to get too much off topic, that we've seen 3 different Celtics go to different teams and they've all struggled.
Yeah, they have. And they've all struggled offensively.
Yeah.
Avery Bradley defensively he's still fine. Don't get me wrong on that. He's been fine defensively for the Pistons, but the shooting has just not been there. It's funny. They got rid of KCP for being, inconsistent offensively and being a solid defender, and for Avery Bradley
to do the same
thing as KCP. Yeah, he can't stay consistent.
Yeah, so Pistons, I think we agree, are buying. New York Knicks.
I think they're selling. I don't, yes, it's what's that term? They've been a flash in a bucket, or they've shown that they can compete. Porzingis, obviously, we know he's going to be a star, possibly. He's going to be a star. He's an all-star this year. Hardaway Jr., when he's healthy, has been great. But guys like Cantor, it's funny. I would love to see him moved again, just because it's hilarious to me that this guy automatically pleads all loyalty to a team and then gets traded. So Cantor, I think, could get moved. I think Courtney Lee will get moved. I know the Warriors, right? They have interest in Kylo Quinn.
Yeah.
I think the Knicks are going to sell. Get rid of some of these guys. Try and get some, and keep building around your future, which is Hardaway Jr., Frank, and Porzingis.
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of Knicks fans, this is always a problem in New York, is they want the Knicks to go all in and make a trade to make the playoffs. But the matter of the fact is, that even if they make a trade, they'll just get into the playoffs to get knocked out in the first round. No trade they make is going to get them to the second round. And that includes probably adding Kemba Walker. I don't think that trade gets them to the second round either. So they're better off just sitting on their assets that they have, trading some of the, the veteran guys like the Courtney Lees, the Kyle O'Quinn, maybe Enes Kanter if someone wants to take on his deal. But I think it just makes more sense because you want to build a strong core for your team to move forward with and be good for a long time instead of just taking a short-term risk to be a little bit better for this year.
Yeah, the Knicks with Kemba Walker, though, I will say, would be a lot more enjoyable to watch. I would like watching Kemba, Hardaway Jr., and Porzingis on the floor. I think that would be really fun. But like you said, you're not contending with those guys.
Exactly. And Kemba is from New York, so that would be a cool thing for him. But the Pelicans, obviously, we're going to talk about Cousins on another pod, but with that injury, are they buyers or sellers?
Buyers, because I think the only guy they would have traded to start would have been DeMarcus Cousins. So I'm going to say they're buying. I don't think – I know, yes, this is now the time for Anthony Davis to become a Celtic. No, I don't see it. I don't see them blowing it up now, especially because now Pelicans front office, you're going to think what could have been, right? You're not going to think, oh, we failed, let's blow it up. You're going to think, damn, if only he stayed healthy, what could have been? So now you're going to want to retool to re-sign him and see what you can be next year.
Exactly. And I think for the Pelicans and their coach and their front office, a lot of jobs are on the line. So they just want to kind of go all in, get into the playoffs, at least get a chance in there, get some guys some experience. And then Anthony Davis still is, one of the best players in the league, arguably top 5. Moving on to another team, the Clippers.
I think they sell. I know they're one of the more enjoyable teams still to watch this year. But I think they sell. I think DeAndre and Lou Williams, like I said before, are on the way out. It's funny because they do have a lot of guys they play now. I think someone said when I watched one of their last games, it might have been Clippers versus Rockets actually. This is one of the few teams that Doc Rivers runs a 10-man rotation. He actually goes deep onto his bench to play guys.
Yeah, they've had a lot of guys.
Yeah, they've had a lot of guys contribute this year. And, some of these guys, what's his name, CJ Williams or whatever, one of the small forwards. And there's a few guys who may not be, big names, but they can make a decent impact on other teams if they were to be traded.
Yeah, there's a couple guys on that team. They've done a good job getting some young talent. And like you said, Doc doesn't usually play young guys. There's been first-round picks and even really seen much court time, just ended up not getting re-signed. So I think that's something. I think
guys Willie Reed too, Nick. I just want to sorry to interrupt you. Willie Reed and Markel Harris or what's his name?
Montrezl Harris. Montrezl Harrell.
Right, Harrell. Right.
Yeah.
Those two guys too. They play good minutes. And, if you want to move those guys in a smaller deal, front court depth somewhere.
Yeah, definitely some opportunities. I think the Clippers are going to be a team that isn't fully buying or fully selling. I think they're just a team that's going to approach the deadline to make a trade. If it's a trade that makes them better, they'll do it. If it's a trade that benefits them, they'll do it. If it's a trade that doesn't benefit them, they're not going to do it. And that could be getting rid of DeAndre, that could be getting rid of Lou Will, or it could be adding another guy. Who knows what they're trying to do. But that wraps it up for this episode of the Trade Deadline Marathon NBA Outlet Edition. Like I said, we're going to be talking NBA trades all up to the deadline on the website, on the podcast, everything. Kory, thank you for hopping on. As always, thank everybody for listening. Rate us, review us, let us know how we do on iTunes. Thank you and have a great day.
Ciao.